My name is Scarlett Wren. I'm 27 years old. And for 7 years, my family treated me like I was one bad moment away from hurting a child. Not because I had ever hurt one. Because my older brother, Daniel, told everyone I had grabbed his son during an argument. That was the word he used, grabbed. He said it quietly at first, like he was trying not to make things worse. Then he said it enough times that it became part of the family. The kind of thing people didn't question anymore. After that, nobody trusted me around their kids. If I walked into a room and a child ran toward me, someone always found a reason to call them back. If I offered to help with a birthday cake, someone else handed out the plates. If a baby started crying and I turned my head too quickly, my mother would put a hand on my arm and say, "Scarlett, don't." Like my name was a warning. My mom used to say, "I worry about you. I think you're one bad day away from hurting someone." She never said it in anger. That was what made it worse. She said it like concern, like love. Like she was protecting the world from me. So for 7 years, I wasn't invited to family events where children would be present. Not Christmas mornings, not Easter egg hunts, not first birthdays, not backyard cookouts. I saw my nieces and nephews grow up through photos other people posted it online. I learned they had lost teeth, started school, learned to swim, got glasses, won spelling bees, and hated broccoli from captions written by people who had not been removed from the room. Then last month, my niece Lily collapsed at her birthday party. She was 5. She had pink ribbons in her hair and glitter on one cheek because Claire had hired a face painter who was supposed to make everyone look like butterflies. Lily had chosen a ladybug instead. I remember that clearly. I remember the red dots on her cheek. I remember the paper streamers hanging too low from the ceiling of the community hall. I remember the smell of vanilla frosting and plastic tablecloths. And I remember standing by the wall with a paper cup of lemonade in my hand while my entire family pretended not to watch me. Daniel was across the room near the gift table. His eyes kept moving from my face to my hands. That was something he had done for years. He watched my hands like they were objects he had once scribed to people and now needed to make sure behaved the way he had promised. I was not there as family, not really. I was there because the hospital outreach team I worked with had a children's safety booth at the same community hall. It gave everyone a polite reason to tolerate me. I could be there, but not too close. Useful, but not included. That was usually how they preferred me. Lily had been running between tables with the other kids, laughing so hard her curls bounced against her shoulders. Then a few minutes later, she wasn't laughing. That was the first thing I noticed, not the fall. The silence. Children make noise even when they are doing nothing. They hum. They drag their shoes. They ask questions nobody answers. They breathe loudly through frosting. Lily had gone quiet in a way that made the room feel wrong. I looked over and saw her standing near the table with the paper apples taped to the front, one hand pressed weakly against the edge. Her face had changed, not dramatically. Not the way people expect emergencies to announce themselves. Her mouth was slightly open. Her eyes were unfocused. Her shoulders were doing too much work. I set the lemonade down. Then Lily folded. Claire screamed first. It was a short sound, almost angry with fear. People moved toward Lily and then stopped because no one knew what to do with their bodies. Chairs scraped. Someone knocked over a stack of paper plates. A child started crying because the adults were frightened, and children can feel that before they understand why. I was already moving. "Lily," I said, not loudly. Her lips were pale at first. Then they started turning blue. I knelt beside her. Daniel saw me and shoved through 2 folding chairs so hard one of them tipped backward. "Don't touch her," he shouted. I heard him. I really did. I heard the 7 years inside that one sentence. I heard every canceled invitation. Every room that went quiet when I entered. Every time my mother said my name like I was something fragile and dangerous. Every warning dressed up as care. But Lily's breathing was wrong so I picked her up. Daniel's voice cracked. "Scarlett, put her down." I didn't look at him. I supported Lily's head and turned her slightly. Her little body felt too light in my arms. Too loose. There was frosting on her fingers. Her ladybug face paint had smudged near her temple. "Call 911, I said. No one moved. I looked at Claire. Now, Claire fumbled for her phone with both hands. Daniel was still yelling. I don't remember every word. I remember pieces. "Get away from her." "You're not supposed to." Scarlett, I swear to God, my mother was saying my name too. Softer than Daniel, but not kinder, Scarlett. Scarlett, don't make this worse. That almost made me look up, almost. Instead, I slid 2 fingers under Lily's jaw, checked what I needed to check, listened for what I could through the noise, and adjusted her position. Her chest hitched. Not enough. The room blurred around the edges, but not because I was panicking. It was the opposite. Everything narrowed. Lily's airway, her color, her pulse. Her small fingers curling and uncurling against my wrist. Come on, sweetheart, I said quietly. Stay with me. Daniel was close enough now that I could feel him hovering over my shoulder. Put my daughter down. There are moments when a person shows you who they think you are. Not with a confession, not with an explanation, with instinct. Daniel's instinct, while his daughter was turning blue, was not to ask what I saw. It was not to ask what I knew. It was not to ask why I was calm. It was to stop me. Because in his version of the world, my hands near a child were the emergency. Not the child who couldn't breathe. I kept working. Lily gave one weak, awful cough, then another. A thin sound came out of her. Barely there, but it was air. It was something. I changed her position again and kept my voice steady. That's it. Good girl. Again. The room had gone strange by then. People were still making noise, but it felt far away. Someone was crying near the cake table. A balloon brushed against the ceiling. Claire was talking too fast to the dispatcher. Daniel was still yelling. Then Lily took a real breath. It was rough and wet and small, but it was a breath. Her color shifted, not all at once, not like in movies. The blue at her lips eased slowly, like something terrible was being talked out of the room. And that was when Daniel stopped screaming. I felt the silence before I looked at him. His mouth was open, his face was flushed. His hands were still lifted, like he had been about to pull Lily away from me. But he didn't. For the first time in 7 years, my brother was not looking at what he had told everyone my hands were capable of. He was looking at what they were actually doing. And the worst part was, this was not the first time I had saved one of Daniel's children. Before I tell you what happened after the paramedics came, and before I tell you why Daniel looked more terrified of the truth than he did of the ambulance lights, I need you to understand something. So if you're listening to this, please hit like and subscribe. Stay with me. Because what happened in that community hall did not begin with Lily's birthday party. It began 7 years earlier, with another child who couldn't breathe, another room full of family, and a lie that everyone found easier to believe than the truth. Now let me take you back. Before my family called me dangerous, they used to call me careful. Not out loud all the time, not in some dramatic way, it was just understood. I was the one who noticed when the oven had been left on after Thanksgiving dinner. I was the one who remembered which cousin was allergic to strawberries. I was the one who checked the back door twice before bed because my father used to say, "A house sleeps better when somebody keeps watch." I grew up in a narrow white house with green shutters and a backyard that always smelled like cut grass in the summer. There was an apple tree near the back fence. My father planted it the week I was born. I don't remember that, obviously, but I remember him telling the story every year when the apples came in small and hard and too sour to eat unless my mother baked them with brown sugar. He would stand under the branches with his hands on his hips, pretending to inspect it like a serious farmer, even though we lived in a neighborhood where every house had a mailbox shaped like a tiny barn. "This tree is yours, Scarlett," he would say. Daniel always rolled his eyes because he was older and thought traditions were embarrassing until they benefited him. My father would tap the trunk with 2 fingers and say, "This is where we remember who we are before the world tells us." At the time, I thought he was talking about trees. Kids do that. They hear the words but not the weight. Daniel and I used to play under that tree until the backs of our legs were striped from sitting in the grass. He was 4 years older, which meant he got to decide the rules and change them when he was losing. He was charming even then. Adults liked him. He knew when to smile, when to apologize, and how to make a mistake look like an accident someone else had caused by standing too close. I don't say that because I hated him. I didn't. For a long time, I adored Daniel in the quiet, embarrassing way younger sisters adore older brothers who do not always deserve it. When he was kind, he made you feel chosen. When he was cruel, he made you feel like you had misunderstood him. That difference mattered later. But back then, he was just my brother, and I was just the little sister who watched too closely. The first time I understood what my father meant by keeping watch, Daniel was 12 and I was 8. It was late October. Cold enough that the windows had fog on the inside, but not cold enough for my mother to turn the heat on without complaining about the bill. Daniel had been sick for 2 days. Not terribly sick, at least that was what everyone said. He had a cough that sounded dry at first, then tight. He kept saying he was fine, because he hated being treated like a little kid, and my mother kept believing him because Daniel was good at sounding annoyed instead of scared. That was one of his talents. He could make need look like irritation. That night, my father had fallen asleep in the armchair with the television low. My mother was in the kitchen, making a list for the next day, writing with one hand and rubbing her forehead with the other. I was sitting on the hallway floor outside Daniel's room. I had a book open on my knees, but I wasn't reading, I was listening. There is a difference between a cough that interrupts sleep and a cough that steals it. Daniel's had changed sometime after midnight. It came in short bursts, then long pauses. The pauses bothered me more than the coughing. I remember pressing my ear near the crack of his door. Inside, Daniel whispered, "Stop being weird, Scar." His voice was thin. "I'm not being weird," I whispered back. "You're breathing loud. So are you." He didn't answer right away. That was what made me stand up. When I opened the door, Daniel was sitting on the edge of his bed with both hands braced on the mattress. His shoulders were lifted. His mouth was open a little. The blue light from the digital clock made his face look strange. I didn't know the word for it then. Retractions, accessory muscles, work of breathing. I know those words now. Back then, I only knew my brother looked like he was trying to climb out of his own chest. I ran for my father. I didn't scream. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me already understood that panic takes up room, and Daniel needed all the room he could get. I shook my father's shoulder until his eyes opened. "Dad," I said. Daniel's breathing wrong. He was out of the chair before the sentence finished. My mother came in behind him, still holding her notepad. The page had grocery items on it. Milk, paper towels, apples. I remember that because she dropped it in the hallway and the paper slid under the small table where we kept the phone book. There was movement after that. My father calling the doctor's answering service. My mother searching the medicine cabinet. Daniel snapping, "I'm fine," even though he clearly wasn't. Me standing near the doorway because nobody had told me to leave, and I was afraid that if I looked away, something would happen. By morning, Daniel was better. Not fine, but better. The doctor said it was a respiratory flare, probably brought on by a virus. He gave instructions. My mother wrote them down neatly and taped them inside the cabinet door, next to the school lunch calendar. Daniel acted embarrassed for 2 days and then pretended it never happened. My father didn't. A week later, he took me into the kitchen after dinner. The house smelled like dish soap and cinnamon because my mother had baked apples from the tree. He set a little box on the table. It was navy blue velvet, worn at the corners. I thought it was earrings. I remember feeling guilty because I didn't have pierced ears yet, and I didn't want him to feel bad. But inside was a silver locket, small, shaped like a birdcage. Delicate bars across the front, with a tiny latch that stuck if you pressed it too fast. "It was your grandmother's," my father said. I touched it with one finger. "It's too pretty for me," I said. He smiled a little. "That's not how pretty works." My mother was rinsing plates at the sink. She glanced over, and I caught something on her face that I did not understand then. Not jealousy exactly, not anger, more like calculation. "Isn't she a little young for that?" she asked. My father didn't look away from me. She knew something was wrong before I did. Daniel was at the table too, pushing baked apple around his bowl with the back of his spoon. He rolled his eyes. She was hovering, that's all. My father said, "Sometimes hovering is another word people use when they don't want to admit someone was paying attention." The room went quiet. Not angry quiet, just careful. My father opened the locket. Inside was a folded scrap of paper so small I didn't understand how his hands had managed it. He had written 3 words, "Scarlet keeps watch." I looked at them for a long time. I couldn't have explained why they made my throat hurt. Daniel made a sound through his nose. "She's going to get so annoying now." My mother said Daniel, but she said it softly. The way people correct someone they agree with a little. My father fastened the chain around my neck himself. His fingers were warm against the back of my neck. The locket landed just below my collarbone, light but noticeable. "There," he said. "Not because you're responsible for everyone. Because you notice. That matters." I wanted to believe him. For years I did. I wore that locket to school picture day, to church, to the grocery store, to the dentist, even though the hygienist asked me to tuck it under the paper bib. I wore it when we picked apples, and when we raked leaves, and when Daniel taught me how to throw a baseball only so he could laugh when I threw it badly. The locket became one of those things people stopped seeing because it was always there. Except Daniel saw it. He noticed it in the way older siblings notice anything that gives a younger child a piece of importance. Sometimes he would flick it lightly with one finger when he walked past me. "Security guard," he'd say, sometimes "little watchdog." He made it sound like a joke. Most things in our house started as jokes if Daniel said them. That gave everyone a way to ignore the sharp part. My mother was good at that too. She loved us. I want to be fair about that. She packed lunches with notes on napkins. She kept a folder for every school year with report cards and permission slips. She ironed Daniel's shirts before debate tournaments and drove me to library club even when she thought it was strange that I wanted to spend more time around books after school. But she cared deeply about how things looked. If Daniel got in trouble, she wanted to know who else had been involved. If I got in trouble, she wanted to know why I hadn't known better. Daniel was going through a phase. I was old enough to understand. Daniel was sensitive under all that attitude. I was too serious sometimes. None of it felt cruel when I was young. It felt like weather, something you adjusted to. I learned to bring home signed forms before anyone asked. I learned to pack extra pencils. I learned to notice when my mother was tired and start clearing the table without making a show of it. Daniel learned something different. He learned that if he sounded wounded enough, people moved the blame away from him. When he broke the kitchen window with a baseball, he said I had distracted him. When he forgot to feed our neighbor's cat, he said the written instructions were confusing. When he borrowed my father's good flashlight and left it outside in the rain, he said nobody told him it mattered. And somehow, by the end of those conversations, my mother would be rubbing his back, and my father would be reminding both of us to be more careful. Both of us. That phrase followed me for years. Both of us. Even when I had not touched the baseball. Even when I had not seen the cat instructions. Even when I was the one who found the flashlight in the mud and brought it inside. I didn't have language for that then. I just knew Daniel could bend the room without seeming to push. Claire came into the family much later, when Daniel was already an adult and I was finishing training. She was pretty, in a nervous way, always smoothing her sleeves and checking Daniel's face before answering questions. The first time she came to dinner, she brought bakery cookies and apologized 3 times because one had cracked. Daniel laughed and kissed the side of her head. "Claire worries about everything," he said. She smiled like that was sweet. I remember noticing that she didn't eat until Daniel did. It was a small thing. Small things are easy to dismiss, most people do. But my whole life had been built around small things. A missed breath, a dropped grocery list, a locket clasp sticking under my thumb, a brother smiling while the room quietly rearranged itself around him. Back then, none of it looked like danger. It looked like family. And maybe that was why it worked so well. Because when people hurt you inside a family, they usually don't start with something obvious. They start with habits, with little corrections, with jokes everyone laughs at, because the alternative is admitting someone meant them. By the time I was old enough to understand that Daniel's version of events usually protected Daniel, I was also old enough to know that saying so out loud would make me look bitter. So I stayed useful, I stayed quiet, I kept watch, and for a while they loved me for it. Until the day they didn't. The day they stopped loving me for keeping watch was a Saturday in June. I remember that because the kitchen windows were open, and my mother kept complaining that the flies were getting in. She had made lemonade in the big glass pitcher with the yellow lid, the one she only used when people came over. There were paper plates stacked beside the sink, hamburger buns on the counter, and a bowl of pastel candies on the coffee table because Daniel's son, Owen, had been asking for them all afternoon. Owen was 4 then, small for his age, serious eyes. hair that stuck up in the back, no matter how much Claire wet it down with her palm. He had that same tight-chested breathing Daniel had as a kid. Not every day. Not enough that people talked about it constantly. But enough that I noticed the inhaler in Claire's purse. Enough that I noticed how quickly he got tired when he ran in the yard. Nobody liked when I noticed those things, not yet in a cruel way, just in a way that made the room pause. Daniel had brought Claire and Owen over for my father's birthday. Dad was already sick by then, though we were all pretending he was just tired. There were appointment cards stuck to the fridge with magnets, prescription bottles lined up near the coffee maker, and a folder from the clinic sitting under a stack of mail. That was how our house looked that summer. Like normal life had been placed carefully over something frightening. At first, the day was fine. Dad sat outside under the apple tree with a blanket over his knees, even though it was warm. Owen picked up fallen leaves and brought them to him like gifts. Claire hovered near Daniel, asking if he wanted more ice, more chips, a different chair. Daniel was in one of his moods, not loud at first, just tight. He kept checking his phone, then putting it face down. He snapped at Claire when she asked whether Owen needed his inhaler before running again. "He's fine," Daniel said. Claire's hand stopped halfway into her purse. I saw that. I also saw Owen cough into his elbow near the back steps and then look around to see if anyone had noticed. I had just finished my EMT training then. I wasn't working in pediatrics yet, but I had enough experience to know that children hide distress badly and adults miss it beautifully when they are busy being offended. I almost said something. Then Daniel looked at me across the yard and I didn't. That was the way it worked with him. You learned which doors had locks before you touched the handle. By late afternoon, everyone had moved inside because the heat got thick. The adults stood around the kitchen, cleaning without really cleaning. My mother wrapped leftovers in foil. Claire collected cups from the living room. My father had gone to rest. Owen sat on the rug near the coffee table with a toy truck in one hand and candy in the other. Daniel was arguing with my mother about Dad's appointments. It started quietly. "You can't keep scheduling things without asking me," Daniel said. My mother wiped the counter in small, hard circles. "Your father asked me to. He asks you because you make everything sound urgent. It is urgent." "No, Mom." "You make it urgent." I was at the sink rinsing serving spoons. I remember the water running over my fingers. I remember the locket tapping lightly against the edge of the counter when I leaned forward. Claire said, "Daniel, maybe not right now." He turned on her. "Please don't start." She looked down. Owen started crying then, not loudly. Just that tired, frustrated cry children make when the room gets too sharp for them. Daniel pointed toward the living room without looking. "Owen, stop!" Owen cried harder. I turned off the water. There was a sound under the crying, a small wet catch. I looked around the kitchen wall, into the living room. Owen was standing now, one hand near his mouth, eyes wide. His cry had stopped, but his face was still shaped like it. That was what made my stomach go cold. He wasn't making noise. His little shoulders jerked once. The candy bowl was tipped on its side. I moved before I thought about whether anyone would like it. "Owen," I said. Daniel was still talking. "I'm tired of everyone acting like I'm not allowed to have an opinion about my own father." I crossed the room fast. Owen's lips were not blue yet, but the skin around his mouth had gone pale. His eyes were watering. He was trying to cough and couldn't. I reached him and turned him toward me. His fist was clenched around the toy truck. There was candy stuck to his damp fingers. I said his name again lower, "Owen." He made a tiny sound. That was enough. I pulled him against me, angled him forward, and gave firm back blows the way I had been trained. He stiffened. His feet kicked once against my shin. The truck fell to the rug. "Behind me," Claire gasped. "What are you doing?" Daniel shouted. I did not answer, Owen coughed. Nothing came out. I adjusted him and did it again. This time, a small piece of candy hit the rug near the leg of the coffee table. Owen dragged in air like it hurt. Then he started sobbing, real sobbing, loud, scared, alive. For 1 second, nobody moved. That second should have saved me. That second should have been enough. Claire dropped to her knees and reached for him, crying his name. I let him go as soon as I knew he was breathing. He clung to her with both arms around her neck. There were red marks on his upper arms where I had gripped him. Not deep, not bruises yet. Just fingerprints blooming, because children's skin shows everything. before adults understand what they are seeing. Daniel saw them. He looked from Owen's arms to me, and something changed in his face. I can still see it, not fear. Fear had been there when Owen couldn't breathe. This was different. This was Daniel realizing that if everyone understood what had just happened, they would also understand what he had missed. His son had been choking while Daniel argued in the kitchen. His son had been standing 3 feet from him, silent and terrified, and Daniel had not noticed. But I had. I watched him choose. It took less than a breath. "Why did you grab him like that?" Daniel said. The room turned. I blinked. He was choking. Daniel stepped toward me. "You grabbed him." "He couldn't breathe. You grabbed my son during an argument." That sentence landed strangely. Not because it made sense. Because it was shaped like something he had already decided would be repeated. Claire looked confused, still holding Owen. My mother stood near the counter with the foil in her hand, her eyes moving between Daniel, Owen, and me. I waited for someone to say the obvious thing. The candy was on the rug. Owen was coughing into Claire's shoulder. My hand was shaking, but only a little. "Daniel," I said. He was choking. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You don't put your hands on my child like that." My mother said, "Scarlett, maybe just give everyone a minute." That was the first small door closing. I looked at her. "Mom, he couldn't breathe." "I know," she said, but she didn't sound like she knew. She sounded like she wanted the room to become manageable again. Owen lifted his head from Claire's shoulder. His face was wet and red. "Don't fight," he whispered. It was so small I almost didn't hear it. Then he looked at me, not accusing, begging. "Please don't make Daddy mad." That was the sentence that stopped me. Not Daniel's voice. Not my mother's careful face. A 4-year-old child, still hiccuping from not being able to breathe, asking me to keep the room calm. I thought I was protecting him. That is the part I still have to live with. I thought the truth could wait until Owen was asleep, until Daniel cooled down, until Claire found the candy on the rug and replayed it correctly, until my mother stopped needing everything to look peaceful, so I said nothing. Daniel did not. By the next day, he had called my mother. By the next week, the story had a shape. Scarlett got overwhelmed. Scarlett grabbed Owen too hard. Scarlett scared everyone. It was not said like an accusation at first. That would have been easier to fight. It was said like concern. My mother called me 2 days later while I was folding laundry in my apartment. "I know you were trying to help," she said. I held a towel in both hands. I was helping. There was a pause. "You scared him, sweetheart. He was choking. I'm not saying he wasn't, but she was." That was the trick of it. Saying the right words in the wrong order until the truth got tired. A month later, she said, "Maybe you don't realize your own strength." "By Thanksgiving," she said, "I just think we need to be careful with you around the kids." And the following spring, after I asked why I had not been invited to Owen's birthday, she said the sentence that stayed. "You're one bad day away from hurting someone, Scarlett." I remember sitting on the edge of my bed with the phone pressed to my ear. The locket was in my hand. The little birdcage latch had stuck again, and I kept pressing it with my thumbnail until it opened and closed, opened and closed. I wanted to say, "Dad gave me this because I noticed when Daniel couldn't breathe." I wanted to say, "Owen is alive because I noticed him too," but my father was sleeping more by then. Owen was still small. Claire had stopped calling me directly. And Daniel's story had already found shelter in everyone else's mouth. So I became careful in a different way. No babysitting. No being alone with the children. No holding babies unless someone offered first. And after a while, no one offered. At family dinners, if a child climbed into my lap, someone found a reason to need them in the kitchen. At Christmas, my mother handed me serving spoons instead of nieces and nephews. At first, I thought the lie would collapse under its own weight. I didn't understand yet that families can build entire houses around a lie if it keeps the wallpaper clean. 7 years is a long time to be almost family, not gone, not forgiven, not included. Just close enough that people could still use your name when they needed something, and far enough away that they did not have to make room for you at the table. The first year, I still checked my phone around holidays. I told myself invitations could come late. People got busy. Families were messy. Maybe everyone was waiting for the awkwardness to fade. But Christmas came, and my mother texted me a photo of the tree after they had already opened presents. There was Owen in plaid pajamas, sitting between Daniel and Claire. There was my father in his recliner, thinner than the year before, smiling like the effort hurt. There were stockings on the mantel. Mine was not there. My mother wrote, "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Hope you're having a peaceful morning." I stared at the word peaceful for a long time. Then I put my phone face down and made toast I did not eat. That was how it went after that. I learned about birthdays from social media. I watched Owen lose his baby teeth in photos. I saw Claire post a picture of him holding a lunchbox on his first day of kindergarten. I saw my mother comment, "Our brave boy. I sent gifts anyway, small ones, books, pajamas." A wooden puzzle shaped like animals. Things that did not require explanation. Sometimes Claire texted thank you. Sometimes she didn't. Once, a package came back to my apartment with a sticker from the post office saying undeliverable, even though I knew the address had not changed. I left it in the front hall for 3 days before opening it. It was a dinosaur sweatshirt. Owen would have liked it. I folded it and put it in the bottom drawer of my dresser because throwing it away felt cruel and keeping it felt worse. The family group chat went quiet around me slowly. At first, there were fewer pictures. Then plans moved somewhere else. Then I would get the practical messages only. "Can you send Dad's medication list? Do you remember the name of that specialist? Can you pick Mom up from the clinic Thursday? Daniel has a meeting. Scarlett, what does it mean if a child coughs until they throw up?" That one came from Claire at 11:42 on a Tuesday night. I was already in bed, my hair still damp from the shower, the locket sitting cold against my chest. I sat up. "Who is coughing?" I typed dots, 3 dots, disappeared, appeared again, Owen. "But Daniel says it's probably allergies." I closed my eyes for a second. "Any wheezing? Blue around lips? Trouble speaking?" She answered each question like she was afraid the phone could judge her. I told her what to watch for. I told her when to go in. I told her not to wait if his breathing changed. She wrote, "Thank you." Then, a few minutes later, "Please don't mention this to Daniel. He thinks I overreact." I saved that message, not because I planned to use it, at least that is what I told myself. I saved a lot of things over those years. Screenshots, voicemails, appointment details my mother forwarded without thinking. A photo of the discharge instructions from the day Owen had a respiratory flare at 5. Claire sent it to me because she didn't understand the wording, and Daniel was too stressed to talk about it. There was one voicemail from Daniel I never deleted. It came after Owen's urgent care visit, when Daniel was tired enough to forget to be careful. "Scarlett," he said, and his voice sounded rough, irritated. "Claire told me she called you. I don't want everyone making a thing of Owen's breathing. He's had issues before. You know that. Just don't start acting like that day at Mom's was some big emergency you saved us from, okay?" It's not helpful. He hung up right after that. I listened to it 3 times. Then I put the phone down on my kitchen table and looked out the window until my tea went cold. There it was, not an apology, not the truth exactly, but close enough to touch, he knew. He knew Owen had breathing issues. He knew that day had not been what he said it was. He knew I had not grabbed his son out of anger. For a few minutes, I let myself imagine sending it to everyone, my mother, Claire, aunts, cousins, family friends who had watched me become the person children were gently moved away from. I imagined the silence after they heard it. I imagined someone saying, "Scarlett, why didn't you tell us?" And that was where the fantasy always broke, because the answer had Owen's name in it. Owen, who was still a child. Owen, who had whispered, "Please don't make Daddy mad." Owen, whose private medical history would become evidence in a family trial nobody would handle gently. I had proof, but it was not clean proof. It had a child attached to it, so I kept it. I made a folder on my laptop and named it Taxes 2019, because no one opens a folder named that unless they have to. I put the screenshots there. I backed them up on a drive inside an old pencil case. Then I went to work. At work, nobody was afraid of my hands. That was the strange part. Parents handed me their children in exam rooms and emergency bays. Nurses asked me to check breathing treatments. Doctors asked what I had noticed. I taped tiny oxygen tubes to soft cheeks. I counted respirations while cartoons played on wall-mounted televisions. At work, being careful was a skill. At home, it was a symptom. My father died in the 6th year. It was early March, before the apple tree bloomed. The hospital room had beige walls and a whiteboard with the date written in blue marker. My mother kept correcting the nurses when they mispronounced our last name. Daniel stood near the window with his arms crossed, answering work emails on his phone. I sat beside Dad and held his hand. The locket was under my sweater. He was too tired to talk much by then. But once, when my mother and Daniel stepped into the hall to discuss paperwork, he opened his eyes and looked at me. "Tree still yours," he whispered. I leaned closer. "I know." His fingers moved against mine, barely. "Don't let them tell you different." I did not know if he meant the apple tree. I still don't. After the funeral, everything became paperwork. Death certificates, insurance forms, clinic bills, password lists, bank folders. The practical debris grief leaves behind when it stops being dramatic enough for people to bring casseroles. My mother called me because I knew where Dad kept things. Of course I did. I knew the filing cabinet stuck on the second drawer. I knew he wrote passwords in the back of the birdwatching guide. I knew the warranty for the water heater was in a folder labeled House, even though my mother insisted it should have been under Utilities. For 3 weeks, I was useful again. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, sorting documents while Daniel wandered in and out, making calls loudly enough for everyone to know he was busy. One afternoon, he stood at the back door looking out at the yard. "That tree is going to be a problem if we sell," he said. My fingers paused over the keyboard. My mother looked up from a stack of envelopes. "What tree?" "The apple tree." Daniel tapped the glass. "Roots are probably a mess. Yard would look bigger without it." I looked past him. The tree was bare, black branches against a gray sky. It looked smaller than it had when I was a child. Or maybe I had just gotten used to things shrinking after I lost them. My mother sighed. "Your father loved that tree," Daniel shrugged. "Sentiment doesn't raise property value." No one asked me. That was what I noticed. Not because the tree legally belonged to me. It didn't. Not in any paperwork that mattered. But everyone in that room knew what Dad had always said. "This tree is yours, Scarlett." My mother shuffled papers, then her eyes moved to my chest. I had taken my sweater off because the kitchen was warm. The locket was visible. "Speaking of your father," she said carefully, "I've been thinking about that necklace." I looked at her. She smiled a little, but it was the kind of smile people use before asking for something they know they shouldn't want. "It might be better kept with the family things." My hand went to it before I could stop myself. "It is with family," I said. Daniel turned from the door. The room got very still. My mother's expression softened, which meant she was about to hurt me gently. "I just mean," she said, "with everything that's happened, it might be less complicated if heirlooms stayed here." Less complicated. That was one of her favorite phrases. It meant she had already decided whose feelings were inconvenient. I closed the laptop slowly. For 7 years, they had treated me like a risk to the family. But suddenly, the thing my father gave me belonged with the family. The tree was property. The locket was an heirloom. My memories were negotiable. My place was not. That was when I understood something colder than anger. They did not just want me gone from the room. They wanted to remove the evidence that I had ever belonged there. After that conversation about the locket, something in me stopped reaching, not caring. That would have been easier. I still cared when my mother called with a question about insurance. I still cared when Claire sent a photo of a rash and asked if it looked like hives. I still cared when Daniel texted me at 6:30 in the morning because he needed Dad's old garage code to let a contractor in. But I stopped waiting for them to remember me kindly. There is a difference. By then, my life had become very scheduled. Work helped with that. Hospital shifts, outreach events, supply orders, training refreshers. Little boxes on a calendar that did not ask whether anyone trusted me at Christmas. That was how I found out about Lily's birthday. Not through my family, through a work email. The subject line was simple: Community Hall Pediatric Safety Outreach, Saturday Setup. I opened it between patients, standing at the counter near the respiratory supply closet, with a half-finished coffee going cold beside the nebulizer kits. The email listed the date, time, contact person, and event details. Children's wellness booth. Emergency preparedness flyers, demonstration station. Host family, Wren birthday party, private rental in adjacent hall. For a second, I just looked at my last name on the screen. Wren birthday party, not Daniel's name. Not Claire's, not Lily's, just Wren, as if the word still included me. I checked the attached schedule. My name was already on the volunteer list. Because I had signed up 2 months earlier, before I knew what event would be in that room. We did outreach all the time. Schools, libraries, community centers. Anywhere parents would accept pamphlets if there were stickers for the kids. I could have removed my name. No one at work would have questioned it. But I sat there with my thumb, resting against the edge of my coffee cup, reading the address again and again. Then my phone buzzed. It was Claire. "Hi, Scarlett. I heard you might be at the community hall Saturday with the hospital booth." I waited. Another message came. "It's Lily's birthday, just so you know, just so you know." Not "we'd love to have you." Not "Lily would like to see you." Not even "you're invited." I typed, "I'm scheduled for the booth." 3 dots appeared. That should be fine. It's a public area. The party is in the main room, but the booth is near the lobby. I understood every word she did not type. "Stay in your area. Don't assume. Don't make this hard." Then, almost a minute later, she added, "I don't want things to be awkward." I stared at that one longer. Things. That was what families called damage, when naming the person who caused it would make dinner uncomfortable. I wrote, "I understand." That was usually what I wrote when I did not agree, but did not have the energy to negotiate my humanity over text. Daniel called that night. I let it ring twice before answering. Not because I was trying to make a point. Because I needed 2 breaths. "Hey," I said. He didn't say hello. "Claire said you're going Saturday." "I'm working the outreach booth." "Right. But you'll be there." I stood in my kitchen in socks, looking at the grocery list clipped to my fridge. Eggs, oatmeal, batteries, the ordinary things that keep a life from falling apart. "Yes," Daniel exhaled through his nose. "I don't want this becoming a thing. It won't. You say that, but you have a way of standing there looking wounded." I looked down at the counter. There was a small nick in the laminate near the sink. I rubbed my thumb over it. "I'll be working," I said. "And the kids will be there. I know. So just keep some distance, okay?" I'm not trying to be harsh. That was Daniel's favorite kind of harshness. The kind he announced as restraint. I said, "Okay." He paused, maybe expecting more. An argument would have helped him. It always did. It gave him something loud to point at. When I gave him nothing, he filled the space himself. "Lily gets overwhelmed at parties. She's been a little dramatic lately. Claire's making it bigger than it is." My thumb stopped moving. "What do you mean dramatic?" "Just coughing, crying, the usual. She does this thing where she works herself up and then can't calm down." "How long has she been coughing?" Another pause. "Scarlett, it's a question. She's fine." I looked toward my work bag by the door. It was already half packed from the day before. Folders, hand sanitizer, laminated breathing charts, a plastic model airway wrapped in a towel so it wouldn't crack. Daniel said, "Don't start." I'm not starting. Good. Because this is her birthday, not a shift. I closed my eyes. There it was. The warning inside the reminder. "Okay," I said again. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a while without turning on the light. The apartment was quiet, except for the refrigerator, humming and traffic, passing wet on the street below. It had rained earlier. Everything outside looked blurred. My mother called the next morning. Of course she did. She had always preferred to arrive after Daniel and soften the shape of what he had already thrown. "I heard there's some concern about Saturday," she said. I was folding blue hospital t-shirts into a tote bag. "There isn't." "Well," she said gently, "you know how people worry." I placed one shirt on top of another. "Smooth the sleeves flat. People or Daniel?" "Scarlett, one word. Tired. Warning, mother." I waited. She sighed. "I just think it would be good for everyone if you were mindful." "Of what?" Tone space. The children. The children. As if I had forgotten what category of human I was accused of being unsafe around. "I'll be at the booth," I said. "I know, sweetheart, and that's good. It gives you something to focus on." Something to focus on. Like I needed a task to keep myself from becoming dangerous. I thanked her for calling, because I did not know what else to do with the conversation without dropping it and breaking something. That Friday night, I packed more carefully than I needed to. I checked the outreach forms, counted the coloring sheets, added extra stickers because children were always braver when they got to choose something shiny afterward. I charged the tablet we used for sign-ups. I put spare gloves into the side pocket, then took them out and replaced them with a newer box because the old one had a bent corner. None of that was necessary. All of it gave my hands somewhere to put the feeling. Claire texted just after 9. "Lily's excited. She keeps saying ladybug cake. I almost smiled. Then another message came. She's still coughing a little, but Daniel thinks it's allergies. The hall gets stuffy, so maybe we'll bring water. I sat down on the edge of my bed. Bring her inhaler if she has one. I typed. Claire did not answer right away. Then, it's not really asthma, just reactive sometimes. Reactive sometimes. Words people used when they wanted a medical issue to sound less inconvenient. I typed, still bring it. This time there were no dots, no response. I set the phone beside me and opened the top drawer of my nightstand. The old pencil case was still there, under a stack of receipts and a spare charger. Inside was the drive with the screenshots, the voicemail, the things I had never used. I did not take it out. I just touched the zipper. Then I closed the drawer. Saturday morning, I drove past the old house before going to the community hall. I told myself it was because it was on the way. It wasn't. The for sale sign was leaning near the curb, not fully planted into the ground. Someone had trimmed the hedges too short. The porch looked bare without Dad's wind chime. I parked across the street for less than a minute. The apple tree stood in the backyard, visible over the side fence. Its branches were uneven, one side cut back hard. There was orange marking tape tied around the trunk, for removal, probably, or inspection, or whatever word made it sound less like losing one more thing. I got out of the car. The grass was damp. My shoes sank a little near the curb. I didn't go into the yard. I didn't need Daniel accusing me of trespassing on a house where I had learned to ride a bike. But near the sidewalk, just beyond the fence line, there was a small fallen twig with 2 green leaves still attached. I picked it up. It was nothing, a scrap, too small to save anything. I placed it gently in the outside pocket of my work bag anyway. Then I got back into the car and sat there until my breathing evened out. But before I pulled away, I reached under my collar and touched the locket. The birdcage latch stuck when I pressed it. It always did. I opened it anyway and looked at the folded note inside, worn soft from years of being handled carefully. Scarlett keeps watch. I closed it. Then I drove to Lily's birthday party with my work bag on the passenger seat, a twig from my father's tree in the pocket, and the clear understanding that everyone in that room would be watching my hands. I told myself I was only going for work. But when I fastened my locket before stepping out of the car, I knew that wasn't completely true. The community hall smelled like floor cleaner, frosting, and wet coats. It was one of those low brick buildings with a bulletin board near the entrance and a row of metal folding chairs stacked against the wall. Someone had taped pink and red streamers over the doorway to the main room. Paper ladybugs were stuck to the windows. On the long table near the back, a cake sat under a clear plastic cover with Lily's name written in red icing. I stood in the lobby for a moment with my work bag against my shoulder. Not long, just long enough to understand the shape of the room. The outreach booth was exactly where Claire said it would be, near the entrance, technically separate from the party. We had a folding table, a hospital banner, a basket of stickers, coloring sheets, and a plastic airway model that always made children either curious or horrified. The party was only 10 steps away. 10 steps is not much unless an entire family has spent years turning it into a boundary. Claire saw me first. She was carrying a stack of red paper plates and moving too quickly, the way people do when they are trying to look busy enough to avoid a conversation. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Her eyes dropped to my work bag, then to the locket at my throat. Just for a second. "You can set up there," she said, nodding toward the booth. "We're still getting the kids settled." "Okay." She looked like she wanted to say something else. Maybe thank you for coming. Maybe please don't come any closer. Instead, Lily shouted from across the room. "Mommy, where are the ladybug wings?" Claire turned immediately. "Coming, baby." And that was that. I set my bag under the table. The apple twig was still in the outside pocket. I tucked it farther down, where no one would see it. Then I started arranging pamphlets. That helped. Stacks make sense. Forms make sense. Put the sign-up sheet on the left. Pens in the cup. Stickers where the kids can reach them. Hand sanitizer near the edge. Ordinary order, clean and simple. Behind me, children were laughing. A few wandered toward the booth, drawn by the stickers. Before they reached me, an adult always appeared. "Come on, let's get cake later. Not right now. Stay where I can see you." None of them said my name. They didn't need to. Daniel came in from the side hallway carrying a cooler. He saw me and stopped. His eyes went to my hands. I was placing a stack of coloring pages beside the crayons, that was all. But I still felt the old inspection. "Scarlet," he said. "Daniel." He set the cooler down harder than necessary. "Everything good here?" "Yes, good." He looked toward the party room, then back at me. "Remember what we talked about?" I slid a pen into the plastic cup. "I'm working." "Right," he said. "Let's keep it that way." There were people around us, so he smiled after he said it. That was always the part outsiders missed. My mother arrived 10 minutes later with a gift bag and a cardigan buttoned wrong at the bottom. She hugged Claire, kissed Lily's hair, and then came over to me. Her hand touched my elbow. Light. Careful. Public. "You look tired," she said. "I'm fine." She glanced towards the children. Big day. Lots of noise. "I know. I just don't want you getting overwhelmed." There it was again. Soft enough that anyone nearby would hear concern. Sharp enough that I knew exactly where it was meant to land. "I won't," I said. She patted my arm once and walked away. Lily was wearing a red dress with black dots and 2 ribbons tied around her pigtails. Someone had painted a little ladybug on her cheek. She looked beautiful and overheated. Her face was flushed, and every now and then she paused in the middle of running, like she needed to remember what came next. I noticed the water bottle in Claire's hand. I noticed Lily refused it twice. I noticed Daniel telling someone, "She's just excited," when Lily coughed near the gift table. The cough was short, not dramatic. That was the problem. The dangerous ones usually aren't dramatic at first. I stayed at the booth. I smiled when children chose stickers. I explained to one father how to tell when breathing looked like work instead of noise. I kept my voice level. I did not cross the invisible line. Then a boy in a blue shirt bumped into the drinks table. A cup of red juice tipped over and ran across the plastic tablecloth, dripping onto the floor. Lily was beside it. The juice splashed her dress and she startled, then began to cry. Not loudly at first, more embarrassed than hurt. I moved without thinking, not toward a crisis, just toward a child with sticky hands and juice on her shoes. I crouched a few feet away and reached for napkins from the edge of the table. "Hey," I said gently. "It's okay, it's just juice." Lily looked at me. Her eyes were wet, her breathing hitched. I held out the napkins. Then Daniel's voice cut through the room. "Don't grab her." Everything stopped, not completely. Children still moved. Music still played from someone's phone. But the adult part of the room froze. I looked up. Daniel was staring at me like he had caught me doing exactly what he had warned everyone I might do. My hand was still extended with napkins in it. "I wasn't," I said. My voice came out quiet. A woman I didn't know looked from Daniel to me, then gently pulled her toddler closer to her leg. Claire stood near the cake table with her mouth slightly open. Lily stopped crying because children always know when adult fear has entered the room. Daniel walked over and lifted Lily under the arms too fast for a child who was already upset. "She's fine," he said to the room, smiling like he was cleaning up a small misunderstanding. "Scarlet just forgets sometimes." There it was, enough for strangers to hear. Not enough for me to fight without sounding defensive. I stood. Red juice had gotten on my fingers. I wiped them slowly on a napkin. Once, twice. My mother looked away. That hurt more than Daniel. It usually did. "I'll get more paper towels," Claire said too brightly. The party resumed, but it did not return. That is the thing about public humiliation. The room keeps moving, but now everyone knows where not to look. I went back to the booth. A child asked for a sticker, then glanced over his shoulder at his mother before taking it from me. I smiled anyway. Lily sat in a chair near the gift table after that. Claire gave her water. Daniel knelt beside her and said something close to her ear. Lily nodded, but she didn't look like she was listening. She looked tired. Her ladybug cheek had smudged from tears. I watched her chest. I told myself not to. Then I watched it again, fast, shallow, a little uneven. The room got louder when someone announced cake. Children rushed toward the table. Parents lifted phones. Claire found the candles. Daniel stood behind Lily's chair, with both hands on the back of it, performing proud fatherhood for the cameras. Everyone sang. Lily smiled weakly. She blew out one candle. Claire laughed and helped with the rest. Then, while everyone clapped, Lily went still. Not sleepy still, wrong still. Her hand slipped off the edge of the table. I was already moving before the first person said her name. "Lily?" Claire said. Lily's eyes unfocused, her lips parted. She slid sideways out of the chair. Claire screamed. Daniel grabbed for her and missed. I crossed the space between the booth and the party room in seconds. "Call 911, I said. Daniel spun toward me. "Stay back." I dropped to my knees beside Lily. Her lips were pale. Then not pale, blue. "Scarlett, don't touch her," I heard folding chairs scraping. Someone said, "Oh my God." Someone else started crying. The music was still playing, cheerful and stupid, until a parent finally shut it off. I put my hand under Lily's head and turned her gently. Daniel reached for my shoulder. "Get away from her." I did not look at him. "Claire," I said. "Call now." Claire was shaking so hard she almost dropped her phone. Marianne stood frozen near the drinks table, one hand pressed to her chest. Lily's breathing was barely there. Her body had that terrifying looseness children get when they are no longer fighting in a way adults can see. I checked her airway. Nothing obvious in her mouth. I positioned her carefully, supporting her neck, opening the airway, watching her chest. "Come on, Lily," I said. "Breathe for me." Daniel was shouting above me. "She's my daughter. Put her down. You don't know what you're doing." That last one almost broke through. Almost. But Lily's pulse was under my fingers, and it was too fast, and her color was wrong, and there was no room in me for anything except the next correct thing. I gave instructions to the nearest adult without looking up. "You front door. Watch for paramedics. The man moved. You. Clear the kids out." A woman began guiding children toward the hallway. I adjusted Lily again and listened. There was a faint movement of air now, not enough, but there. "Good," I whispered. "Stay with me." The locket slipped forward from my collar and rested against Lily's red dress. For one strange second, I saw the silver birdcage against the black dots, and I thought of my father's handwriting folded inside it. "Scarlett keeps watch," then Lily coughed, small, weak. I shifted her slightly and kept her airway open. "That's it," I said. Again. Daniel was still yelling. Then Lily dragged in a breath, ragged, thin, beautiful. Her lips did not change right away. They never do. People think life comes back like a light switching on. It doesn't. It returns by inches, like something crawling home. Another breath came, then another. The blue began to fade, not gone, but fading, and Daniel stopped screaming. The silence was so sudden, I heard the plastic tablecloth flutter from the air conditioner. I looked up just enough to see his face. His mouth was open, his eyes were fixed on my hands. One hand supporting Lily's jaw, one hand steady against her shoulder. The same hands he had spent 7 years turning into a warning. The same hands everyone in that room had been watching. For once he was watching them too. Not the story he had told about them, and Lily breathed again. The paramedics arrived 7 minutes later. I know because someone had knocked the wall clock crooked during the panic, and I kept looking at it while I held Lily in position. 7 minutes can feel like a small lifetime when a child is breathing badly. When they came through the door, the room split open for them. People moved back. Claire was crying silently with one hand over her mouth. Marianne stood by the drinks table like she had forgotten how to walk. Daniel was beside me, but not touching me now. Not yelling either. That silence was not peace. It was a man trying to understand what could still be saved. One of the paramedics knelt beside me. "What happened?" I gave the facts. 5-year-old female, collapse after exertion and crying. Cyanosis around lips, shallow respirations, airway repositioned. Breathing improved but still labored. Possible reactive airway history. He looked at me once. Not suspicious, just assessing. "You medical respiratory therapy," I said. "Pediatric." That was the first time some of the guests looked at me differently. Not kindly yet. Just differently. The paramedic nodded. "You did the right thing." He said it like a simple fact. Maybe that was why it landed so hard. Not because he praised me. Because he didn't make it emotional. He didn't know the history. He didn't know my family had spent 7 years turning my instincts into evidence against me. He just saw a child breathing because someone had acted. Lily was taken out on a stretcher with Claire walking beside her, shaking so badly another responder had to guide her by the elbow. Daniel followed, then stopped near the doorway and looked back at me. For 1 second, I thought he might say something. He didn't. At the hospital, everything became quieter. Not calmer, just quieter. Hospitals have a way of swallowing panic and turning it into paperwork, clipboards, wristbands, insurance cards, nurses asking the same questions twice, because accuracy matters more than emotion. The soft beep of monitors, the squeak of shoes on polished floors. Vending machine coffee burning in paper cups. I sat in the waiting area with my work bag between my feet. The apple twig was still in the side pocket. My hands smelled like sanitizer and frosting. No one sat next to me. Claire was in the room with Lily. Daniel stood near the nurse's station with his arms crossed, answering questions like each one was an accusation. She's had a cough, the nurse said. Any diagnosed it's asthma, reactive airway? Previous episodes, rubbed his jaw. Not diagnosed, kids cough. The nurse waited. She gets dramatic, he added. When she cries, she works herself up. I looked at him. Claire looked at him too. It was small, but I saw it, the first crack in the habit. The first time she heard his version and did not immediately move herself around it. The nurse asked, "Any family history?" Daniel hesitated. That hesitation did more than a confession would have. Claire's voice came from behind the curtain. Daniel, he didn't answer right away. I stood, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough that my chair scraped softly against the floor. Daniel saw me move and his face tightened. Don't, he said, one word. The same kind of word he had used at the party. Not loud, not pleading, a warning. But Lily was behind that curtain, and a nurse was trying to understand what had almost taken her breath away. So I looked at Claire. There's history, I said. Daniel's face changed. Scarlet. Claire stepped into the hallway. Her eyes were red. What history? I could have done it loudly. I could have made the hallway stop. I could have pulled out 7 years of pain and placed it at Daniel's feet where everyone could see it. Instead, I lowered my voice. Not here. Claire followed me to the end of the hallway near a window that looked out over the ambulance bay. The glass reflected both of us faintly. Her party dress had red icing on the sleeve. My locket was still outside my shirt. Marianne came too, slower, pretending she was only checking on us. Daniel followed last. Of course he did. I took out my phone. My hands were steady, but I felt the rest of me beginning to shake somewhere deep enough that no one could see it. 7 years ago, I said, Owen wasn't scared because I grabbed him during an argument. He was scared because he was choking and couldn't breathe. Claire's lips parted. I kept my voice even. He had candy in his mouth. Daniel was arguing in the kitchen. I noticed Owen had gone silent. I cleared his airway. He had marks on his arms because I had to move fast. Daniel said, "That is not." I looked at him. He stopped. Not because I was frightening, because he knew what was in my hand. I played the voicemail. His old voice filled the hallway, thinner through the speaker, but clear enough. Claire told me she called you. I don't want everyone making a thing of Owen's breathing. He's had issues before, you know that. Just don't start acting like that day at Mom's was some big emergency you saved us from, okay? It's not helpful. The message ended. No one moved. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. Claire stared at the phone, then at Daniel. You knew, Daniel looked past her. You knew Owen had breathing issues, she said. And you let me think Scarlett just. Her voice broke there. Not loudly, worse, quietly. I put the phone away. I didn't use it because Owen was little. He begged me not to make everyone fight. I thought keeping him out of it mattered more than clearing my name. Claire pressed both hands over her mouth. Marianne whispered, "We were protecting the children." I looked at my mother. For years, I had imagined that moment. I thought I might feel anger like fire. But what came was colder. "Clino," I said. "You protected the story." Her face crumpled, but I did not move to fix it. That was new for me. Daniel leaned against the wall like his legs had stopped trusting him. I was scared, he said. It was the closest thing to honesty he had offered. I nodded once. I know, he looked at me then. I said, "But you let everyone be scared of me instead." There was no shouting after that. That surprised me a little. I think part of me had expected the truth to make noise. But truth, when it finally entered our family, was quiet. It sat down between us and refused to leave. Lily stayed overnight for monitoring. She improved. Claire insisted on a full respiratory follow-up and complete medical history. This time, Daniel did not get to wave it away as drama. After that day, people reached out. A cousin texted. I had no idea. An aunt wrote, "Your mother said things were complicated." Claire called me 2 weeks later and apologized. Not perfectly. People rarely do. She cried through half of it and said she should have asked more questions. I told her I wished she had too. My mother tried to apologize in softer words. We were all under a lot of stress. It was such a confusing time. I only wanted everyone safe. I listened. Then I said, "I'm not carrying the gentle version anymore." She went quiet. I kept the locket. No discussion, No family vote, no careful conversation about heirlooms. It stayed where my father had placed it, against my chest, close enough that I could feel it warm when I walked. The house sold at the end of summer. Before the closing, I went there alone. The rooms were empty and louder than I remembered. Every step echoed. The kitchen had a pale rectangle on the wall where the calendar used to hang. The backyard looked smaller without chairs, toys, or dad, pretending the apple tree was an orchard. Daniel had already arranged for the tree to come down before the new owners moved in. I did not ask permission. I took a cutting, not much. A small living piece from a lower branch, wrapped in damp paper towels and placed carefully in my bag. I brought it home and planted it beside the narrow patch of grass outside my apartment. I did not know if it would take. For weeks, it looked like a stick. Then one morning there was green, small, stubborn, enough. Months later, Claire brought Lily to see me. It was not a dramatic reunion. There were no tears at the door. Trust does not return like that. It comes slowly if it comes at all. Lily was shy at first. She held Claire's hand and looked around my little living room like she was deciding whether it was safe to remember me kindly. Then she saw the young tree outside. "What is that?" she asked. I looked at the thin stem, the new leaves moving in the wind. My hand went to the locket. The latch still stuck. It always would. "Something that survived being moved," I said. Lily seemed to think about that. Then she nodded. As if that made sense to her in the simple way children sometimes understand things adults spend years avoiding. I stood beside that little tree after they left, the locket warm against my chest, and I realized I was no longer waiting for my family to give my name back to me. My father had already done that, long before they called me dangerous. Long before Daniel turned my hands into a warning. Long before I understood how much a family could rewrite and still call it love. Scarlett keeps watch, not because they asked me to, not because they deserved it. Because that was who I was before the world told me otherwise, and this time, I believed it.